are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's finally time for Truss to spread her wings, and the new PM has made a big splash on her first international trip to the Big Apple, declaring she won't let left-wing economic orthodoxy dictate her policy.
You're prepared to be unpopular, aren't you?
Yes. Yes, I am.
But with murmurs of a climb down over the sale of Channel 4, I explore in my digest next why Liz Truss must commit to her blockbuster promises if she wants to be one of our great leaders. I'll get the reactions of my superstar panel too. Tonight, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. As Leicester descends into violence between elements of the city's Hindu and Muslim communities and unrest in Birmingham follows tonight, who is to blame for sectarian aggression on the streets of Britain? Well, Nigel Farage believes irresponsible and illegal immigration may have contributed to the tension and fears the establishment and MSM will continue to overlook these issues to avoid being called racist. He'll outline why at 9:40. A new era has dawned for the royal family, but will our new monarch be able to shed his often unfavourable public perception?
Am I listened to in this family? Am I seen for who and what I am? No.
Robert Lacey, the best-selling historian integral to the hit royal drama The Crown, he's changed his mind on King Charles and believes that Brits want to give him a chance. He'll reveal why and look at the hurdles that stand in His Majesty's way, including Scottish independence, Prince Andrew and the Sussexes. That's at 10:20. Plus, as This Morning stars, Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby deny skipping the queue to the Queen's Line in State while describing how they got priority access. Do you buy their explanation?
None of the broadcasters and journalists there took anyone's place in the queue, and no one filed past the Queen. Please know that we would never jump a queue.
Well, I've got the footage that proves that's exactly what they did in the media buzz at 10:30. As they plan a month of hell that includes occupying London, are police too soft on eco-extremists? Representatives of Animal Rebellion, who have issued a call to action for vegans who are willing to be arrested. They'll probably be collapsed actually just as they are arrested. And Just Stop Oil, they are going to battle the Law and Order Foundation Director Norman Brennan in the clash at 9:25. I want your thoughts on that too. And as the White House's COVID policy remains unchanged despite Biden declaring the pandemic over, is this shambolic administration suffering from a chronic case of COVID hysteria? Well, our top US journalist Megan Kelly is going to reveal all on that at 9:50. Is BBC Lovey Graham Norton right that licence fee payers don't want to see right-wing guests? Spiked Online editor Tom Slater tackles that and Uncancelled at 10:40. And it's back. I'll name tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass from my panel's nominations just before the end of the show. Do stay up with us. Of course, we'll have tomorrow's newspapers as soon as they drop as well. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though, and now the official national mourning period is over, I can finally say how revolting it was to see some of the world's COVID dictators like Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron and Jacinda Ardern march around London this past week as if they owned the place, without anyone seeming to question them about the damage they've brought on so many lives. But the Canadian Prime Minister was particularly disgraceful, so he's a woke god, isn't he? But somehow he decided to turn the official mourning period into some sort of jolly, even belting out a song by Queen, yes, really, Queen, at a posh London hotel on Saturday night in an impromptu karaoke session. Look. What a disgrace. And I'm not just talking about the singing, by the way. His spokesman came up with this excuse. After dinner on Saturday, the Prime Minister joined a small gathering with members of the Canadian delegation who have come together to pay tribute to the life and service of Her Majesty. Gregory Charles, a renowned musician from Quebec, an Order of Canada recipient, played piano in the hotel lobby, which resulted in some of the members of the delegation, including the PM, joining. The PM has taken part in various activities to pay his respects for the Queen. Oh, please. Trudeau didn't give a damn. He didn't give a damn about anything other than enjoying himself. I'm glad to see the back of him. My digest on why Liz Truss must put her agenda on fast forward in just a moment. Then my superstar panel weigh in tonight. The top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, the Conservative commentator the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. But before all of that, the news headlines at 9 with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. It's 5 minutes past 9. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the UK's security cannot be jeopardised for the sake of cheap energy. Liz Truss, who's pledged at least £2.3 billion in military aid to Ukraine next year, says the West must continue to stand up to Russian aggression. She and world leaders will discuss the war at the UN General Assembly, which is currently underway in New York. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres took aim at energy companies as he addressed the General Assembly, accusing them of claiming huge profits while people and the planet pay the price.
It's high time to put fossil fuel producers, investors and enablers on notice. Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices.
The Prime Minister is also due to hold bilateral talks with world leaders at the two-day event in New York. Ms Truss has admitted that negotiations for a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US won't restart for years. President Joe Biden stalled trade negotiations after expressing concern that the Northern Ireland Protocol could damage the peace process. Downing Street says the UK and France will enhance cooperation on energy to cut costs for households. The Prime Minister and French President Emmanuel Macron have made this agreement while underscoring the importance of working together to end reliance on Russian energy and strengthen energy security. Western leaders have condemned plans by Russia to hold referendums in 4 Moscow-held regions of Ukraine. The Kremlin says voting will be held this coming weekend. The deputy head of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says the outcome of votes would be irreversible. Ukraine and the West say they'll not acknowledge any vote or any outcome. More than 200 young Muslims surrounded a Hindu temple in Smethwick, West Birmingham this evening, as tensions which brought violence to Leicester appear to have spread to the West Midlands. All organisers of the protest say it was launched in a response to a decision by the temple to invite a controversial speaker to an event there. It comes after tensions involving mainly young men from sections of the Muslim and Hindu communities saw unrest on Saturday night. Police said 25 officers and a police dog were injured, with 47 people arrested. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The race is on for Liz Truss to prove her radical tax cut plan can bolster growth and save us from economic catastrophe. Politics has rightly been paused these past 12 days as the country came together to mourn Queen Elizabeth the Great. But now the new Prime Minister must fast forward her series of major announcements. To hell with the orthodoxy, to hell with the haters and wreckers, and to hell with the MSM, which has relentlessly pushed a left-wing financial agenda for years. Well, today, I got mixed signals about whether Truss is serious about the bold and visionary agenda she set out to Tory party members across the summer. The first was positive, actually. It came out of her own mouth in New York when Sly News political editor Beth Rigby spewed out her usual lefty diatribe. Truss, Iron Lady style, stared her down, answered the question directly and stuck to her agenda.
Just on this quickly, Labour's policy to tax the energy companies is supported by 68% of the public, according to polls. You're prepared to be unpopular, aren't you?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Do you care about fairness, Prime Minister, as well? And they might not think it's fair that their children have to fund government debt to fund, say, tax cuts for big business or energy bills, and then they ultimately pick up the bill all their children do, all their children's children. They'll think it's not fair. You understand that. You can disagree with that, but you understand that point.
That's a particular point of view you're expressing, which is what people on the left of politics often express. What I'm saying is that by keeping taxes low and growing the economy, we will get more tax revenues in.
So on tax cuts, I feel hopeful the Treasury blob are not going to win this time. This week, the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng is believed to be planning to reverse the 1.25% increase on national insurance contributions and scrap Rishi Sunak's horrific hike in corporation tax from 19% to 25%. Potentially, there are even whispers the 1% income tax cut, which Boris Johnson planned to introduce in April 2024, could be fast-tracked. On other important policies, though, the jury is sadly out. The new Culture Secretary, Michelle Donlan, this morning refused to commit to selling the hard-left public broadcaster Channel 4, despite a commitment from Truss to stick to the long-term Tory manifesto pledge. Watch.
Selling of Channel 4, is that going to happen?
So as the Prime Minister said, we do need to re-examine the business case, and that's certainly what I'm doing.
When you say re-examine the business case, with a view to what?
Well, looking especially at the business case for the sale of Channel 4 and making sure that we still agree with that decision, and that's what I'm doing.
Oh, OK, so if a case is made now, if you look at this and you see that there isn't an obvious business case, which after all a lot of people have argued, you are willing, at least, I'm not asking you to announce one way or the other, obviously, this morning, but you are willing to look again at that policy. It may not happen.
Well, I'm the type of politician that bases their decisions on evidence, that bases their decisions on listening. And that's what I will be doing over the coming weeks. I will take that approach when it comes to Channel 4 and every aspect of my brief.
I'm sorry, that is pathetic. There is absolutely no business case for the British public to continue to own the biggest lefty broadcaster in the country, which has an avowed anti-union, anti-Brexit and anti-business agenda. The only way for Channel 4 to ever compete against the streaming giants is to compete in the private sector. But this isn't just about a business case, it's about ideology. Truss talked the talk during the campaign against Channel 4 and the British bashing corporation formerly known as the BBC. Now she's got to show those words weren't just sweet nothings to appeal to the Conservative Party base. To respond now, my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reed. So, look, Amanda, I mean, I'm delighted to hear Liz Truss say, actually, Rigby, I don't care what your lefty views on tax policy are, and if you say this is going to make me unpopular, so be it. But then why this U-turn on Channel 4?
Dan, I have to say that I'm not sure what's depressed me most in the last 2 weeks, the fact that the Queen has died, or the fact that Liz Truss is our Prime Minister.
Really?
Look, I'm not one of the...
You were backing her?
I'm not one of... Yeah, because she was the best of a bad lot. And everything she's doing now, this kind of flip-flopping over Channel 4, it does not surprise me. The woman does not have a spine. I hope that she keeps to her promise that she gets rid of the national insurance hike. I hope she keeps to her promise about business taxes. But then she lobs in, we're going to remove the cap on bonuses for people who earn 30 million quid a year. She's got she's tonally deaf. I mean, did you see it? May I, because this is the first time I've actually done a panel.
You just
with
take
Calvin.
over, Amanda.
Calvin,
Hi, Amanda.
may I ask you, if you thought it was appropriate for the Prime Minister to turn up at Westminster Abbey doing the second most important reading of the service, wearing a dress which had what in Australia we call a builder's bum split in the front and a split up the back?
I don't think it's appropriate, but I don't think many people would agree with me.
I totally agree with you. It was totally inappropriate.
I mean, there's all sorts of stuff about what Liz Truss wears, which I can't say on air because I'll definitely get sued. But when we're off, I'm going to tell you all sorts of things I've heard.
Look,
she just looks...
I'm going to
she
stick
does
up
not
for
look
Liz
like...
Truss here. I'm sorry, Amanda. I think it's actually really wrong of you to criticise her appearance. I think she has been faultless. I think she has been
looked like
faultless over the past 12 days.
She's looked like a sack of potatoes in everything she's worn. She needs to go and buy some Spanx. I mean, she's our Prime Minister.
OK, I mean,
she needs to be looking and to get up at the Abbey.
Think of what this woman has been
that.
through. Think of what this woman has been through since the moment that she took office.
The fulfilment of her naked ambition, stabbing Boris Johnson in the back. Yeah, I'm thinking about what she's been through.
Was the dress really low cut? Because I really don't remember that being... Can somebody find me a photo? I really want to see.
It was not appropriate.
Because as a big-boobed woman, I am very sympathetic that it's hard to avoid, honestly.
Standards are just so low.
Sometimes it's just hard not to have them out.
She would not have gotten to the Vatican wearing that. I promise you.
So I think I'm going to go ahead and say, maybe, just being my lovely little feminist self, that we should focus on what she does, not what she wears.
I focused on Boris's clothes as well, so this is not a
he did like he'd been in a washing machine.
He always looks like that. But why does she have to look like that too? She looks like she's not even been in the washing machine.
I'm going to ask why we're getting upset about Channel 4, and I actually know some numbers this time. I'm going to have to read the numbers out to you because I can't remember them off the top of my head. That's a picture of my baby, not numbers.
Are you just going to the website leftytalkingpoints.com?
Okay, woke, horrible Channel 4 that we should...
Liz Truss said there was about 15 billion that could be got by a nice big American trade deal which she was going to land. And then today she was like, oh, well, no, there's no American trade deal now. There might be at some point. Surely that's more concerning than the fact that they might not sell off a fully functioning and profitable organisation
was never going to
like Channel 4.
Trade deal with Biden and the White House. She's been completely realistic.
But
she's
she
been
said there would be.
realistic now that she's
Hang on, so I can say things like, yeah, I'll file my column at 2 on Thursday, and then be like, I was never going to file my column at 2 on Thursday. I'm busy. That's not how it works.
There was a chance when Donald Trump was president that we may have got a trade deal. It's a complete fantasy.
She said this
under Joe
in March this year.
It's a complete fantasy under Joe.
But she said it.
Well, I think she said
it'll be 15 billion.
I think she was being optimistic when she was foreign.
Or lying.
Reaching her intellectual ability.
But lying. Calvin Robinson, can I bring you in? Because to me, it's great that she is talking the talk on tax, but it's really worrying if all of the other ideological stuff starts to collapse, because she was so strong on all of this over the Tory leadership contest. And Channel 4, there are ideological reasons, Calvin, forget the business case for 1 second. There are ideological reasons why we should not own this far-left, Britain-hating broadcaster.
It started already, hasn't it? They're backtracking on all their pledges. This is what the Tories do. They talk the talk, they never follow through. They can't go through with their promises. Channel 4 was supposed to be sold for many reasons. One of them is
David Cameron even wanted to sell
the blatant bias. So they're very anti-Boris Johnson, very anti-Conservative, very anti-Brexit. Remember in the 2019 election, They replaced Boris Johnson with an ice sculpture, for goodness sake.
I know.
Remember Jon Snow saying about Brexiteers, I've never seen so many white people in one place in my life. This is, first of all, it's race baiting, but also the implication there is that Brexiteers are racist.
Dorothy Byrne, their longtime head of news and current affairs,
said he's a known liar.
Compared Boris to Vladimir Putin. That's
So
how
given
deranged they are.
So
Rebecca.
let's try and have a constructive think about what we could do. Let's say that we don't like the way that they are biased. I don't think they are. You think they are. A very small percentage of what they actually create.
Channel 4 News is a left-wing news organisation?
I think it's very difficult not to be, because the majority, I say this every week and everyone gets cross, the majority of people working in the media are left-wing. It's very hard not to have left-wing.
OK, but they're biased.
They are not. They do not.
Channel 4 is a blatant
I am
bias.
willing to accept that they do not nail it on neutrality constantly. What I'm saying is a very small portion of how they make their money comes from news. They are predominantly a creative industry. They have made some of the best TV programmes that have come out of this country. And one of the few
one
things...
in the last year.
In the last year, Dairy Girls.
Well, I can name
some. Which was then sold to Netflix, which then made it self-funded.
That I'm going to watch tonight when I get home, because I can't sleep after the show, because I'm so over,
Naked Attraction.
No, although I have watched that.
Yeah, and it's brilliant.
Just to make me feel better about my own body. Married at First Sight UK.
OK, but Amanda,
they make
that is
fantastic
trash.
programmes.
They would be produced in the private sector.
There are two separate points here, Dan. They do some very imaginative dramas. It's a Lie was one of the most beautiful dramas I've ever seen.
What's the Sin?
It's a Sin was incredible.
And I lived through the 80s, through the whole
no other
gay
broadcaster would have made
epidemic
that.
in Sydney. It was beautiful. It was sublime. But I can't remember the last time I watched Channel 4 News.
But then scrap the news. Just have them stop doing news and keep everything else. That would work perfectly fine. They don't need news. They don't make any money from the news. They make their money from distribution.
Why do we need to own this channel?
Because it makes huge amounts of money from its drama. And also, it does huge work in communities in fostering writers.
Channel 4 in the years to come is going to end up
It is a massive incubator for art.
Truckloads of money, because it's impossible for a small entity like that to compete against the likes
They
of
do.
Netflix.
They literally do. They sell to Netflix. They make all them... Like, Dairy Girls was sold to Netflix. It made, 5 times its original budget. It nails it constantly in drama.
Rebecca, allow them to be an independent channel. Let them compete with everyone else. Let them go. Let us get the big.
But the way that you make great drama is by having time to incubate great writers, which you only get if you have got these kinds of big industrial complexes.
It doesn't really matter, because this
works.
part of the discussion was already had. The government decided they were going to sell Channel 4. If they fall back on it now, how do we know they're not going to fall
Truss said
back on
he was
everything
going to
else?
stick
How can we trust them to deal with immigration or any serious issue?
But why are you crosser about Channel 4 than you are about this trade deal that isn't happening?
Because the trade deal was not... OK, so Rebecca...
But she said it was going to.
Let me just explain. A trade deal, Rebecca, is not something that we just decide to do. It involves the Americans wanting to do deal with us.
She didn't
it
say
was
maybe.
not in the Tory party manifesto, which is what voters signed up to and voted for in 2019. The sale of Channel 4 was.
A more directly comparable example is fracking. 2019, they said, we will not be doing any fracking. It's now 2022, and they said, we're going to do loads of fracking.
But during the leadership campaign, she made absolutely clear that there was likely to be a U-turn on shale gas.
It was 2019 when we voted. We haven't had a chance to vote since then. So they said things in 2019 which they're backtracking on. Surely if you accept they can backtrack on fracking, that's a lot of rhymes, then they can backtrack on Channel 4.
If she was going to backtrack on Channel 4, she needed to say it during the campaign, and she didn't. During the campaign, she committed to selling it.
Dan, the important thing here, the simple thing is that it is a very important thing that we sell off Channel 4. It's a very important thing that we get rid of politically motivated TV organisations that we end up funding.
But one of the few good things about this country is that we make great drama.
That's a misjudgment.
It is.
There are 5 good things about the UK. Pubs, we make great art. I can't think of the other 3, but those are the 2 best things about this country, pubs and our TV. And if we get rid of the TV, it's got rid of...
Rebecca Reid, if you think Channel 4 is one of the best things about Britain, you need to get out a little bit more, You need to get out a little bit more, because Channel 4 despises Britain. The people at Channel 4 despise British people. They are the epitome of the London liberal elite. I know all of the people who work there. They have disdain for most Britons.
You are so deeply wrong. OK, how about this? What about if instead we have a GB News style equivalent, also little bit on the biased side sometimes, who represents the other side. And we have two nationally owned, a righty and a lefty.
Not nationally owned. Not nationally owned. I was going to say absolutely fine if it was privately owned.
Why
Rebecca, the whole point about GB News, we're out there in the public sector. We're not going to the government with some sort of handout. We will survive based on the support of the
national broadcasters are important. There's no reason you can't have one of each.
Let the market decide about Channel 4. And I think Liz Truss needs to do a very swift damage control over these comments from Michelle Donnan this morning, because as Calvin says, the worry is that we're going to start to trust all of the other amazing pledges that she made over the summer. But I'm still quite shocked by Amanda Patel's.
What?
Amanda Patel's, I'm going to say, vicious attack on Liz Truss's appearance, but...
I thought you meant the fact that she likes naked attraction.
I've been just as rude about Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. She needs to up her act.
At some point, I want to see a picture. I want to see a picture.
At the UN. Stop. We just do not.
You make me laugh. Top Daily Mail
I'm
columnist
being
Amanda
serious.
Patel, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Carmen Robinson, and the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. How good is it being back in the studio with my superstar panel? Absolutely loving it. Coming up, why has sectarian violence broken out between Muslims and Hindus in the Midlands, and what can be done about it? Nigel Farage believes irresponsible and illegal immigration may have contributed to the tension. He's here at 9:40. But up next in the clash, as they plot a month of hell that involves occupying London, are police just too soft on these eco-extremists? Well, representatives of Animal Rebellion have issued a call to action for vegans willing to be arrested, and Just Stop Oil, they're going to go head-to-head with the Law & Order Foundation Director Norman Brennan straight after the break. Want your view on this, of course, though. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @gbnews. Our poll running there too. The results straight after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Nigel Farage and Megyn Kelly coming up this hour, but it's time now for The Clash. And as the UK confronts the harsh effects of the cost of lockdown crisis, imagine I told you that at present groups of eco-terrorists are mobilising in the shadows, getting set to make our lives even more difficult. Unfortunately, that's the grim reality facing ordinary Brits, with activists from the Animal Rebellion, Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion joining forces to launch a month of protest hell. Just look at this online Facebook event from Animal Rebellion, inviting people to take part next month in their biggest form of criminal activity yet. They write, "Join us at Green Park Station, London, to, quote, unleash playful disruption across the city, arrestable and non-arrestable roles needed." That's right, these menaces are out recruiting individuals who are committed to breaking the law. The Facebook page also reveals this action will be taking place amidst the other protests of Just Stop Oil's Occupy Westminster and Exiles Rebellion. Thousands of people will be taking action to the point of arrest in London this October, demanding government stop all new fossil fuel developments. And here's a reminder of what you can expect from this coordinated October of hell. Now, as I've been saying for months on end, if we want to stop these maniacs, then our justice system needs to give out much harsher sentences and stronger deterrents. So tonight I'm asking, as they plan a month of hell, should eco-terrorists be sent to jail? Let me know your thoughts by emailing dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at GBNews, vote in our poll while you're there. But to debate this now, I'm joined by the founder of Protect the Protectors and Director of Law and Order Foundation, Norman Brennan, and two members of the campaign groups in question. Emma is a protester and spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, and Robert Gordon is a spokesperson for Animal Rebellion. So, Robert Gordon, why on earth are you advertising for people who are prepared to break the law?
Well, I think first we have to address the fact that we're doing this for a very good reason. We're in a climate and ecological crisis, and we're calling on the government with two very simple demands. Firstly, to support farmers and fishing communities in a just transition to a plant-based food system. And secondly, with all of the land that we would free up by doing that transition, for the government to rewild that land so that we can draw down carbon from the atmosphere, alleviate our climate crisis, and restore biodiversity.
I understand, Robert. You have a political act that you're trying to accomplish. You want to get there by breaking the law and launching violent attacks on Londoners. Now, that's terrorism, Robert. Do you understand that?
There's nothing violent about it. So we're a non-violent civil disobedience movement, and we're exercising our fundamental right to protest. But unfortunately, in Britain today, that means that people get arrested for doing that. So, you talk about scaremongering a lot on this show. That's what you're doing now. Our playful, disruptive protest that you read out about is just that. It's this harmless protest where we're voicing our demands to the government yet again because they're not listening, and you're trying to paint it as this criminal underworld.
Well, Norman Brennan, I mean, I'm sorry, people have been hurt. People could be killed by this form of eco-terrorism, right, Norman? Norman, people could be killed, couldn't they, by this sort of eco-terrorism?
I beg your pardon?
People could be killed, Norman, by this sort of eco-terrorism.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, I don't know what is playful about damaging property, damaging vehicles, disrupting Londoners, disrupting people on the roads, disrupting people travelling on transports and walking the streets. Everybody has got an issue. Millions of us have got an issue. And if we all took to the roads or to the streets and demonstrated in the way that we want for what we want, it would become a free-for-all. It would be anarchy, and it would be the law of the jungle. And it means that the toughest are the ones that get heard, and not only do they get heard, their demands are adhered to. And their demands will be stabbings, shootings, beating people up, robbery. That is what anarchy is. These groups, Dan, are domestic terrorists. They hold us to ransom. They think it's funny. I don't think it's funny, and nor do millions of Londoners and everybody else that are going through a dreadful time at this moment. And all we hear about is these groups demanding what they want. We've all got demands, but we have to keep within the law. And I believe that we need a robust policing, As soon as these groups take to the streets or the transport systems, they're arrested. They're taken to a police station, they are charged, the evidence is put before the magistrates, and we should say to the magistrates, do not release these individuals until they have paid for the damage that they've caused, then fine them, and then send them to prison for a sufficient period of time that they actually will start adhering to the law, because at the moment, they're lawless.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
We're talking about non-violent direct action here. It's very much not stabbing and shootings that you're trying to paint it out to be. It's going out into the streets and causing mild disruption. And if we want to talk about people dying, that's exactly what we're fighting against. We're trying to protect people from the climate and ecological crisis that is going to kill millions and leave between 1 and 3 billion people homeless by 2050. That's 1 in 3 billion.
I know, but I'm sorry, Robert. What Norman's saying is that if you start smashing up buildings, if you start willfully vandalising property, if you start gluing yourself to major roads, you might say that's playful. Actually, what we say is that is a slippery slope to anarchy. But look, I want to bring Emma in, who is a protester and spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Emma, firstly, what's your last name?
Why do you need my last name?
Well, we're all here, Emma, we're all here, we're having a debate, we're all out here, we're prepared to put our last names to what we're saying.
Hello, Dan Wootton, pleased to be here.
Excellent, great to have you there. Just wanted to clarify that, because otherwise it looks like you're almost embarrassed by what you're doing, which I assume you're not.
Of course not, of course not.
So are you prepared to break the law in the same way that the Animal Rebellion group is?
Yeah, I think it's also important to clarify that the UK government are currently breaking their own legally binding targets. The High Court has found the UK government's climate strategy unlawful. And this was back in July when they were planning 40 new oil and gas fields. Now they're planning 130. This is genocidal. And unfortunately, Norman, our law is wrong because it does not punish the companies which are destroying and polluting the things that we need as people to survive. And that is why we have to break the law. The people who hid Anne Frank were breaking the law. The people who betrayed her were obeying it. The law is not above moral consideration. Sometimes the law is not fit for purpose, and that is what we are highlighting. We are accountable for our actions. We do get arrested. We do get put in prison. But the people that are making these decisions and the oil and gas companies and their CEOs, which have denied and delayed any climate action, they are not getting put in the dock, and that is what needs to change.
Norman, do you want to respond directly to that?
Yeah, I do. When I was talking about anarchy, I was talking about if all of us felt like these groups about the issues that concern us, then we all took to the streets. It's a waste of time having the police service because they wouldn't be able to control us. They can barely cope at the moment, and barely can they cope. They're taken away from other very serious and important issues to deal with these morons that do nothing but pontificate these outrageous figures of billions and millions, and in fact they take us to a stratosphere that I don't understand. The law is passed through generations, centuries.
Well, let me just put that, Norman, I just want to put that specific point to Emma and Robert, because that's a very fair point, isn't it, guys? You must accept that at the moment there is a lawless problem on our streets. And your month of action, what it's going to do is divert massive police resources. How would you feel if a member of your family was violently mugged, was robbed, was stabbed, and the police were having to worry about your illegal action rather than actually solve those violent crimes, Emma?
Well, you need to take that point to the government because they need to meet our demand, which is no new oil and gas projects.
Emma, do you realise we're in the middle of an energy crisis?
We're asking for cheaper public transport. We're asking for renewable energy. What is this mad anarchistic society that you're thinking that we're asking for? We're asking for basic things. And we're asking for, an energy system which does not cause people to be starving or freezing to death this winter. There are people in my community that have committed suicide because they're waiting to hear what the plans are about the cost of living crisis. This is not good enough. And it's happened throughout history that people have to stand up for their rights, Norman. And you need to go away. You need to look at what's happening with climate change, and you also need to look at the history of civil resistance. We did not get the vote from voting, Norman. We did not get the vote from voting. Have you heard of the Peterloo massacre? People have been have been...
But you have the vote. You have the vote, and we are a democratic society. So why don't you go and form a political party? Robert Gordon, I want to give you an opportunity.
We have not got time for that. We haven't got time for that. We have not got time for business as usual. We know that we need drastic, systematic changes.
Yep. Okay. Well, Emma, that's fine. I'm just going to point out that, yet again, what you were describing is the action of terrorists.
It's not, and you're doing a massive disservice to the people who have been affected by terrorism.
It is the definition of terrorism in the law.
Do not compare the damage of some billionaire profit companies' profits, the damage to property, to the damage to people's lives, to the damage of people in this country that are in fuel poverty, to the damage of 33 million people who've been displaced in Pakistan. How dare you compare us to terrorists? How dare you?
Well, I will, because I'm not just comparing you. Actually, by the letter of the law, what you are doing is the equivalent of terrorism. And I believe in a civil society, and I believe that the only way that we can move forward is if we follow the law.
For spectators, which is exactly what you're doing, Dan. It's what you disrespectfully did in front of Buckingham Palace by going to the reporter and saying, oh, do I look sad enough? And it's what you're doing right now. It's what you're doing right now. You're
number one, Emma, you don't know what you're talking about because there was no reporter. There was no reporter. And if you want to try and grief shame me, go right ahead, because I have absolutely no regrets about my actions over the past 12 days. No regrets, Emma, whatsoever.
Come back. Can I come back?
Yes, please.
Can I?
Yes, I'm just going to give a final word to Norman, then a final word to Robert. So very quickly, Norman.
All we hear about is ranters, ravers, screamers, trying to distract us from the real issues. I'll tell you what we really need to do, and what I'm sure millions of members of the public that are seeing these moronic, selfish individuals, is why don't we gather them all up, super glue them all together, stick them in the back of lorries and take them into the middle of the wilderness and let them get on with their lives, while the law-abiding public and people that have got serious issues themselves that are not as selfish as these morons get on with their lives.
Okay, final word to you, Robert Gordon.
Yeah, the climate and ecological crisis is the most severe issue all of us face right now. And what Norman's talking about there is violent, is anarchistic, and frankly unacceptable.
Yeah. And I don't believe in that for a single second. Absolutely, two wrongs do not make a right here.
Doing to protect police officers from the climate and ecological crisis, from crop failures, from temperatures that are simply unlivable.
Well, as you know, we are on a march towards net zero, and I believe we're doing far more than virtually any other country in the Western world. And just to bring some facts to the issue, the UK now responsible for less than 1% of carbon emissions. But thank you so much for the debate. That was the founder of Protect the Protectors and the director of the Law and Order Foundation, Norman Brennan. Just Stop Oil spokesperson Emma Brown, I believe she said, and the Animal Rebellion spokesperson Robert Gordon. Thank you all. So who do you agree with? Should eco-terrorists be sent to jail? Well, Sean on Twitter says absolutely they should be locked straight up, no matter whether it's Animal Rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain or Just Stop Oil. From Angeli on Twitter, if they break the law, yes, otherwise no. How can you do that if they haven't broken the law? No, well, obviously we're talking about the people who break the law. And from Arn, yes, they're eco-terrorists. It's different doing placards and protesting. They're damaging farming and food infrastructure, our ability to produce our own energy, and championing cheap foreign imports with poor manufacturing standards because it makes us weak. And your verdict is now in. It's overwhelming. 96% of you agree that eco-terrorists should be sent to jail. Just 4% of you say they should not. Coming up, as the White House's COVID policy remains unchanged despite Biden declaring the pandemic over, is this shambolic administration suffering from a chronic case of COVID hysteria? Well, star US journalist Megyn Kelly gives her take at 9:50. But first, as the violence between Muslim and Hindu groups that has plagued the streets of Leicester spreads to the West Midlands tonight, who is to blame for sectarian aggression on the streets of Britain? Nigel Farage gives the crucial analysis the rest of the MSM continue to shy away from. He's next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Time now for What the Farage. And breaking tonight, more than 200 young Muslim men have surrounded a Hindu temple in Smethwick near Birmingham, as tensions which brought violence to Leicester appears to have spread across the West Midlands. Organisers of the protest say it was launched in response to a decision by the temple to invite a controversial speaker to an event. It follows widespread disorder and violence across Leicester in recent weeks between Muslim and Hindu rivals. Masked groups brandishing weapons and targeting religious sites have been brawling and almost nightly attacks, with police struggling to contain them. Watch.
We're on Nelton Road right now. Stand up with the Hindu mobs. As you can see, look, they're throwing glass. They're throwing glass at us. More Hindus. Yeah, and here they are. Here they are. They're trying to give it to us. They're trying to give it to us. Yeah, but look what they do on the other side.
Police have made 47 arrests so far, with one man jailed for possessing an offensive weapon, though there has been a distinct lack of coverage from the MSM in this country. Community leaders say the violence can be traced back to a cricket match between India and Pakistan on August the 28th, and in a joint statement today, they urged the, quote, inciters of hatred to stop the provocation and violence. They added, we arrived in the city together, we faced the same challenges together, we fought off racist haters together and collectively made the city a beacon of diversity and community cohesion. Nigel Farage, great to have you tonight. You say our immigration crisis is ultimately to blame for those horrible scenes.
Tony Blair's to blame, Gordon Brown's to blame, David Cameron's to blame, Theresa May's to blame, Boris Johnson's to blame, Liz Truss is to blame, and virtually every single MP in Westminster over the last 25 years is to blame. In 1997, the Labour government decided we would go for diversity. Mass immigration. We would rub the noses of the right in diversity. Well, here it is, boys and girls. Here is diverse Britain. A diverse Britain we've not been allowed to criticise in any way at all without the most awful names being thrown at us. Those of us like me, who for 20 years have said immigration can be a net positive for the country, but uncontrolled net immigration is not a positive to the community. And if it happens without integration, it will lead to division and violence. Well, that is playing out on the streets of Leicester tonight. Our politicians have done this to our country, to our lovely towns and cities. This is something from which they may never, ever recover from. We've imported from the subcontinent the tribal hatreds that exist between Hindus and Muslims. Oh, and they say, the community leaders, they had to put up with racism. You're looking at real racism now. We have directly imported racism into our country. There is no other conclusion.
Nigel, the police seem to have lost control as well.
Well, the police don't exist when it comes to anything to do with the ethnic minority. You just look at what's happened to the firearms unit in South London, where a man was shot, and that's never good. But we hardly ever use our guns in this country, and that leads to marches. It leads to Diane Abbott condemning the police, and the Metropolitan Police themselves regretting what has happened and the division it's caused in our community. I tell you this, unless we go back to the doctrine of Martin Luther King, our cities are finished as decent places to live. Unless we end identity politics, unless we treat people all the same under the law, regardless of sex or race or gender or creed, we are finished. But our police are too scared for fear of being called racist. We've seen it with grooming gangs. We're seeing it playing out whenever the police have to use force against somebody who doesn't happen to be white. And now we're witnessing race riots going on the streets of the West Midlands. It's about time we confronted the truth. I've read today's national press telling us it's all the fault of cricket. It's all the fault of social media. No, it's the fault of our leaders.
Well, Nigel, listen to this. On Channel 4 News tonight, the left-wing organisation Darshana Soni, who is their Home Affairs correspondent, blamed sectarian strife in Leicester on right-wing ideology politics imported from the subcontinent. Now, as the Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson pointed out in response, does she mean bigoted, backward, racist, patriarchal views hostile to integration imported from the subcontinent?
Well, that's absolutely what she means. Of course, Alison's absolutely right in saying that. We have imported the politics of the divided subcontinent where racism is part of normal, everyday life in a huge way. And as we go on, and we must think about this, we gave out 1.2 million visas last year. We gave them out to workers, we gave them out to students, to family reunions, and the biggest number of those came from India. Trade deals that the Conservative government want to do with India aren't based on reducing tariffs and simplifying standards. No, giving out large numbers of visas is a part of it. Blair started this, but the Conservative Party are just as complicit. Do we want to finish up with cities like Malmö in Sweden that have gone from being peaceful cities 20 years ago to now being the rape capital of Europe and number 2 for murder? Is that what we want? Is this the diverse Britain Tony Blair sold us? And any of us that dared criticise it were the worst people that have ever lived.
Nigel Farage, very strongly point, and Nigel is, of course, back here at GB News, 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Nigel, thank you so much. Coming up, as the UK battles the worst cost of lockdown crisis in a generation, is new Prime Minister Liz Truss right to pledge billions more in military aid for Ukraine? I'll debate that with my superstar panel and take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the Media Buzz after 10. But first, how can sleepy Joe Biden declare the COVID pandemic over while still subjecting his people to so many liberty-restricting mandates? Well, top US journalist Megyn Kelly, she joins us stateside in just 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front page is coming up, but first it's time for star US journalist and host of the Megyn Kelly Show, Megyn Kelly. Now, despite draconian vaccine mandates being enforced across various democratic states and the unvaccinated still being banned from the US, Sleepy Joe Biden has made this remarkable statement.
Is the pandemic over? The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
He's right, of course, about the pandemic, but his very own administration clearly don't agree, showing us once again who's actually running the show. Biden officials undercut the elderly president, telling CNN that the comments did not signal a change in policy, and there were no plans to lift the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency, which has been in place since January 2020. Pointing to the statement, furious Americans are quite rightly questioning the justification for ongoing pandemic measures, including federal vaccine mandates on healthcare workers, military personnel, and some non-US citizens entering the country by plane. So, I mean, Megyn, is this shambolic administration suffering from a chronic case of COVID hysteria?
First of all, can we just talk about how the fact that Biden says these things is always they try to clean it up at the White House. His White House daddies always have to say, little Joey was confused again. We are not going to defend Taiwan if China tries to take over. We are not saying that the COVID pandemic is over. Where's the Easter Bunny to corral President Biden when we need him? It's embarrassing how they don't let the man say what he actually feels. And I think in this case, this was Biden actually being honest about how he feels. This was every once in a while, the truth pops out of Joe Biden's mouth. So here he says the COVID pandemic is over and he actually means it. I think he actually does mean the thing about Taiwan. I think he lies at other times, like he certainly was lying when he told us the Afghan forces were going to stand up and not fold in a week. There are plenty of things he lies about, like inflation is transitory, but this one's true. He said the truth, and he shouldn't have been corrected by his White House daddies because the pandemic is over. There is no official metric for when a pandemic ends. It's you know it when you see it. And while it took Joe Biden a hell of a lot longer than it took the rest of us to realize this thing is over, it is. His detractors will look and say 400 people are still dying if you look at the numbers on a day, on an average daily basis over 7 days of COVID. I don't believe that. They've been telling us that all along, of COVID or with COVID, because they've been merging those two things from the beginning. You know, old people who die with COVID get counted as people who died of COVID, so they fudge the numbers. You look around, people are doing fine. They've resumed their lives. All the polls show that the people believe the pandemic is over. Only 11% of the people, and that includes the crazies who drive with the masks in their cars while alone, are actually fearful of dying of COVID. So that ought to tell you something. And they're ready to get back to their lives. Now, there's that weird contingent that can't let go of the emergency, that loves governmental powers. And there's that piece of his administration that understands he's got policies that depend on their lie, that we're stuck in perma-pandemic. For example, he just forgave hundreds of billions of dollars in student loans, it's a wealth transfer, by saying it's a COVID emergency. It's justified by okay, You just said that we're no longer in a pandemic, so how can you use the pandemic to justify that? There are other policies too. He's asking for $22 billion right now in pandemic relief. Well, do we need it? Are we in a pandemic or aren't we, right? Like you mentioned the vaccine mandates that are in place for the military and for healthcare workers. So it's like he hasn't matched up the policy with his honest belief, but that's the next step. And if he doesn't, the lawsuits need to come quickly.
Well, and Megan, what about the people who are still being discriminated against as well? Djokovic wasn't allowed in for the US Open. No pandemic. Right. So what's that about? It's about shaming the unvaccinated. I think it's disgusting.
Well, I mean, it's so funny that Novak Djokovic can't get in to play the US Open. And we literally have had 2 million illegal migrants cross our southern border this year alone that we know about. That doesn't count the gotaways, the people who avoided detection. They haven't had vaccines. We have no idea what their COVID status is. And when asked, we're told we're bigots if we object at all to them coming across the southern border. They're so upset that Ron DeSantis flew 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Was anybody tested for COVID there? I don't think so. But Novak Djokovic, who would have been contained, would have been watched, certainly wouldn't have been closer than 6 feet to anybody on that tennis court. No, that's a bridge too far. Why? Because it's virtue signaling.
And Megan, tell me about what Ron DeSantis did, because in fact it's something we would have been covering over the past 12 days, but this country, as you know, stopped because of the national mourning period. But this decision to send the illegal migrants to make a point to Martha's Vineyard, very liberal democratic area, has it worked? Has he made his point?
Absolutely. He's made his point. He's the governor of Florida, governor of Texas, and governor of Arizona have already been shipping these migrants to sanctuary cities across the U.S. where they say, give us your poor or you're tired. We'll take them. We won't work with federal law enforcement to deport you. You're safe here. So Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey have said, here you go. Here's thousands of them. See how you do. And now you've got the Washington, D.C. mayor, among others, saying, it's a humanitarian crisis. We're not Texas. We're not set up for this. Texas is not set up for this either. Texas is getting a daily influx that would dwarf the 50 migrants Ron DeSantis, Florida governor, to make a point, put on an airplane and flew to the Massachusetts town of Martha's Vineyard. We've got towns in Texas that have 148,000 total in population that have had an influx of greater than that this past year, greater than their. So don't tell me, we're not Texas, we're not prepared. Texas isn't prepared either. So Martha's Vineyard is a sanctuary city. They say, come here. All right, fine. Off go the migrants after signing consents. Who wouldn't want to go to Martha's Vineyard? Do you want to wander around Texas aimlessly, or would you like to go to this beautiful beach town on the seaside? So they went, and the Martha's Vineyard liberal elite, these are not poor people, run and say, oh my God, we can't handle this. It's a humanitarian crisis. Need to get them out of here. They spent all of 40 hours there. They shipped them off to a military base. And now the headlines are, and I quote CNN from the Martha's Vineyard residents, they enriched us. we were enriched by the 44 hours we got with them. And we're going to go visit them at the military base to which we kicked them out.
Just as long as they're not in our neighbourhood, right? Megyn Kelly, right. Brilliant stuff. Top US journalist, host, of course, of the Megyn Kelly Show, available on Sirius XM in the US, as well as on YouTube and as a podcast for international fans.
See you, Dan.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the Liz Truss premiership is underway after politics is unpaused, and amid her pledges today, a commitment to pump billions more into Ukraine for military aid.
Making sure we back the Ukrainians, and I'm determined to make sure we back them for the long haul, because we cannot see Russia succeed.
But with the UK facing a cost of lockdown crisis, is this the right move by the new Prime Minister? In just a few moments, I'll ask my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. As sectarian violence erupts between elements of Leicester's Hindu and Muslim communities, forcing police squads to be diverted from the Queen's funeral, is it right to blame social media for turning the Britain's streets into a war zone? Or has illegal and irresponsible immigration led us here, as some of my panel believe, believe we'll debate at 10:30. Support for the royal family has skyrocketed during the farewell of Her late Majesty the Queen, but unfortunately for the new King Charles, so have viewing figures of The Crown.
Am I listened to in this family? Am I seen for who and what I am? No.
But the good news for our new monarch is even the man who helped shape that not always flattering portrayal, the Crown's best-selling historian Robert Lacey, has changed his mind on Charles III and believes Brits wants to give him a chance. So he'll reveal why and look at the hurdles that stand in His Majesty's way, including Scottish independence, Prince Andrew and the Sussexes, live at 10:20. Plus, as This Morning Star's Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby deny skipping the queue to the Queen's Line in State while describing how they got priority access, do you buy their very odd explanation?
None of the broadcasters and journalists there took anyone's place in the queue, and no one filed past the Queen. Please know that we would never jump a queue.
Well, I've got the footage that proves that's exactly what they did, in the media buzz coming up. Meanwhile, as BBC lovey Graham Norton write that licence fee payers don't want to see right-wing guests on his chat show. Spiked online editor Tom Slater uncancelled on that at 10:40. And one of your favourite features, and mine, returns. We will name tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass from my panel's nominations just before the end of the hour. The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way too, after the latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. It is 3 minutes past 10. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the UK's security cannot be jeopardised for the sake of cheap energy. Liz Truss, who's pledged at least £2.3 billion in military aid to Ukraine next year, says the West must continue to stand up to Russian aggression. She and world leaders will discuss the war at the UN General Assembly, which is currently underway in New York. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres took aim at energy companies as he addressed the General Assembly, accusing them of claiming huge profits while people and the planet pay the price.
It's high time to put fossil fuel producers, investors and enablers on notice. Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices.
The Prime Minister is also due to hold bilateral talks with world leaders at the two-day event in New York. Ms Truss has admitted that negotiations for a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US won't restart for years. President Joe Biden stalled trade negotiations after expressing concern that the Northern Ireland Protocol could damage the peace process. Downing Street says the UK and France will enhance cooperation on energy to cut costs for households. The Prime Minister and French President Emmanuel Macron have made this agreement while underscoring the importance of working together to end reliance on Russian energy and strengthen energy security. Western leaders have condemned plans by Russia to hold referendums in 4 Moscow-held regions of Ukraine. The Kremlin says voting will be held this coming weekend. The deputy head of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says the outcome of the vote would be irreversible. Ukraine and the West say they will not acknowledge any vote or outcome. More than 200 young Muslims surrounded a Hindu temple in Smethwick, that's West Birmingham, this evening, as tensions which brought violence to Leicester appeared to have spread to the West Midlands. Organisers of the protest say it was launched in response to a decision by the temple to invite a controversial speaker to an event there. It comes after tensions involving mainly young men from sections of the Muslim and Hindu communities saw unrest on Saturday night. Police said 25 officers and a police dog were injured, with 47 people arrested. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, and the Metro's front page juxtaposes the first look at the new series of Strictly with a return to Balmoral for King Charles as he privately processes his grief at the Scottish residence where his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II died. The Daily Telegraph leads with the headline, Putin set to declare occupied lands part of Russia, as the country on Tuesday paved the way for the formal annexation of large parts of Ukrainian territory. My superstar panel back with me now, the Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, the Conservative commentator the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. Now, Liz Truss will use her first foreign trip as Prime Minister to pledge billions more in military aid for Ukraine. Truss is set to tell the United Nations in New York that in 2023, Britain will at least match £2.3 billion it is spending to fund Ukraine's war effort this year. The focus of her speech in the early hours of Thursday morning, as well as many of her meetings with other world leaders this week, will be to solidify the West's support for Volodymyr Zelensky. Today, as well as defending her plans to tackle the cost of living crisis using tax cuts, Truss reiterated her promise to financially support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
It's very important. As well as growing our economy, we're also protecting our economic security. We're making sure we back the Ukrainians, and I'm determined to make sure we back them for the long haul, because we cannot see Russia succeed. But we also need to make sure we're more energy independent, and we're less dependent on those authoritarian regimes.
So it's right back to business for Truss and her new government following Britain's period of mourning for the Queen. But as the UK faces a monumental cost of lockdown crisis, Amanda Patel, is she right to vow to spend billions more for us to just have seemingly an open checkbook? Because I agree that she has been honest about this, but can we afford it given what we as a country is about to go through?
Well, first of all, she has no mandate to be Prime Minister from the people. She has no mandate, nor did Boris, to pledge this amount of money to Ukraine, which in the beginning I totally agreed with. I wore the T-shirt on the show, Dan. You know, I've had the most enormous admiration for that country. But, you know, we're 2.3 billion at the moment. France and Germany are about 2 billion. America is, I have to check my notes here, $15.8 billion, which is about the same with our tanking pound. I don't think that she has a mandate to commit more billions than she's already committed. And it saddens me to say that, but it's like Claire Short famously said when she was Foreign Secretary under Labour, there comes a point where there's compassion fatigue if things are really hurting at home. And I know you don't like this and you give me that really glary look, you know.
Well, no. I actually...
The viewers can't see it when he gives me that glary look, but he's given it to me.
No, you're so wrong, because I actually completely agree, Calvin Robinson. I'm incredibly worried if this war drags on for months and months and months longer, which is what Putin is clearly intending, by the way.
Not just him.
Well, what I mean is in terms of how he wants to do the referendum in the Donbass region. So this is not a short-term thing. This hope that he was just going to end the war is misplaced.
It's not our war. I do think Putin is a bad guy. I'm not a Putin apologist, but I think Ukraine is a corrupt regime, Nazi-sympathising regime that is a massive money laundering operation, taking billions from the West and shoveling it back in suitcases full of millions to corrupt Western politicians. I think we could have ended the war, or the war could have ended in April. It didn't, because vested interests want it to continue, and we do not have the money to keep shoveling over there.
Rebecca Reid, do you think we need to keep funding this war?
It just feels like, and I'm not the Prime Minister and I'm unlikely to be the Prime Minister, but were I the Prime Minister at some point, when we decided to start pledging billions to something, I would say, cool, and when will we stop doing that? And when we tell the country we're going to give them loads of money, should we maybe let them know how long for? Like, surely when you make this plan, you have to have an exit strategy. It's extraordinary that they just said, yeah, sure, for now, and then however long it takes. But
there is no exit strategy.
But why wasn't there an exit strategy? Of course, we have to keep giving them the money for now because we were doing it before and we committed to it.
Well, Amanda, the problem is politically, the exit strategy, or at least in their heads, was based on the idea that Putin was going to just wither away, and whatever you think of Putin...
Because he's famously a really chill guy.
Exactly, that was just completely delusional, wasn't it? Once he was in on this, he was going in, and there's no stopping him.
I just go back to my compassion fatigue argument that it's really difficult, but we are going to be facing, you know, we've been all distracted most magnificently by the tragic death of the Queen, but now it's back to reality. You've got
And we've got a
people
harsh
who-
winter ahead.
I
people
have
who
a
can't
conspiracy
afford
theory.
I love those.
I genuinely think might be a little bit true that part of the compassion fatigue comes from the fact that when you put refugees in houses with families where there's not enough space and you don't give them that much money to facilitate it, unsurprisingly, the project of people living with Ukrainian refugees has been largely disastrous for a lot of people socially. If you go on Mumsnet, it's wall to wall, I hate my refugee. Honestly, it is. Because unsurprisingly, when you put adults who don't know each other in a house, it's disastrous, everyone's miserable. And do you think maybe there might have been an element, this is my conspiracy theory, that they knew that was going to happen and they knew compassion fatigue would set in and they're waiting for the country to start saying less of the aid, please, so they don't have to look like the bad guys? That is a conspiracy theory.
I don't think so. I think Truss is all in on this because she was Foreign Secretary when the war broke out.
Because she thinks that she's going to get the leverage and the national profile that Boris Johnson got. She wants to be the person that is seen as, that Zelensky, whom I still think is like the hottest leader in the whole world.
Fair.
Zelensky and Putin were ready to sign a peace deal in April, and we, as the West, and Boris Johnson in particular, said, no, we're not ready for peace yet.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an element of the fact that Liz Truss thinks it would be more expensive if the war gets bigger and expands and takes out more of Europe, that it'll cost us more money to defend ourselves?
I do not believe that for a second, actually.
Okay.
I do not believe that. I just think it's total expediency for her to say that we're spending this money to keep us safe. If anyone in this country thinks that Putin's about to lob a nuke into London, they need to go and watch Channel 4 News, Dan.
I'm a bit worried about
that. We don't like doing that. Now, as I've highlighted several times since Queen Elizabeth the Great died, the liberal US media has been obsessed with linking our greatest monarch to every ill of colonialism. So when I saw this next video, I just could not stop smiling. CNN's bitterly woke, recently demoted presenter Don Lemon was stunned into silence when royal commentator Hilary Fordwich soured his attempts to suggest the British royal family should pay reparations for the slave trade. Watch.
Members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion.
That wasn't the answer he was expecting, right? But you know what? Hillary's spot on.
That's not true.
Well, she's spot on because I've researched this,
Denmark
Rebecca.
ended it first. Haiti ended it first.
Rebecca, I've researched this. According to the Royal Naval Museum, between 1808 and 1860, the British emancipated 150,000 African slaves. Around 2,000 British sailors died during their mission to free slaves. That's the problem with the left-wing media. The thing they're most liberal with is the truth.
But that's literally... this is really important. Those things are true, and Britain, I don't feel bad about colonialism. I wasn't there, I didn't do any of it. But we were not the first country to ban slavery. Haiti was, and then Denmark.
We were the most instrumental in that.
Haiti's not like...
Let's just get it right.
We were certainly before the US.
Tasmania banned it.
It's really, really, really important that we don't just say random things and make it up.
One of them.
Yeah, but come on, that really matters to me.
America.
The one of the things I'm really proud about the show is that you don't go around saying random things that aren't true. So it's really, really important.
But the bigger point, though, was the point that I just made about the sailors who died fighting to end slavery for Britain. But from one MSM fail to another, I'm enjoying this. Sly News spinner-in-chief Kay Burley thought she had a great gotcha moment when she pushed Culture Secretary Michelle Donlan on claims she received a 17 grand payout for her 36-hour stint as Education Secretary. Didn't go according to plan. Watch.
Talk to me about when you were at
education? I mean, you weren't there very long, were you?
Well, I was there for over 3 years.
Yeah, as the Secretary of State, how long were you there?
Yeah, well, as you know the answer already, Kay, it was 36 hours, but I was serving in the Cabinet for 10 months, and before that, Minister in 2 different roles, so I was there for over 3 years.
OK, £17,000 is what you got, apparently, as a payoff.
As you know the answer to that one as well, Kay, I didn't take that.
OK, so you said that you were going to give it to a charity?
No, I didn't. I said that if I wasn't able to reject the money, I would give it to a charity, but I rejected it.
Oh, OK,
as you already know.
OK, I didn't know that. That's why I asked you the question. OK, I was surprised you didn't give it to a charity, but there you go.
Well, it was taxpayers' money, so I think it would be wrong for me to take taxpayers' money, then decide, which charity I wanted to give it to. So I was very clear that if I was able to reject it, I would reject it, and I did.
No problems with that, Rebecca Reid?
That one I'll give you.
Okay.
That was nasty,
right.
nasty behaviour.
Thank goodness. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robinson and Amanda Patel, do stand by, because coming up, as violence erupts between elements of Leicester's Hindu and Muslim communities and unrest tonight seemingly spreads to Birmingham, should we blame social media for this violence, or has illegal and irresponsible immigration brought us here? Well, we're going to debate that. Plus, Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield's dodgy apology for their line and state controversy. That's in the media buzz at 10:30. But first, a new era has dawned for the monarchy. But has the sometimes unfavourable public perception of King Charles changed? Well, best-selling historian on The Crown, Robert Lacey, who helped shape the portrayal of Charles III that's taken root in the minds of millions of Netflix viewers, he's actually changed his mind on our new monarch. He's going to discuss the challenges King Charles has to overcome straight after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, after 12 days of publicly mourning his beloved mother under the gaze of the world, King Charles has flown to Scotland to grieve in private. Accompanied by Queen Consort Camilla, the new monarch arrived in Aberdeen earlier today, where he will reportedly reflect at Balmoral Castle, where the late Queen spent her final hours with him by her side. Charles has long suffered from unfavourable public opinion after his messy divorce from the much-loved Princess Diana, and by wading into debates on issues such as environmental protection and architectural preservation. But as the nation mourned his mother and Charles selflessly gave himself to the British public, it quickly became clear that the new king was ready to be a more personal monarch, and it's taken his critics by surprise, like my next guest, the best-selling historian of the hit TV series The Crown, Robert Lacey. Now, Robert has actually helped craft really the way that we see Charles from youth to adulthood over the 6 seasons of The Crown, which has actually surged in popularity following the late Queen's death. Filming of the 6th instalment is currently underway in Barcelona after being paused for a day as a mark of respect for the late Queen, and the highly anticipated season 5 is set to hit screens in November. So let's take a look at the portrayal of young Charles so far.
Am I listened to in this family? Am I seen for who and what I am? No.
One day, dear boy, you shall be king.
What does one have to do to get some kindness in this family?
Well, Robert is happy to admit that he never used to be a fan of that Charles, but has changed his mind based on what he's seen since the late Queen's death. I'm delighted to say Robert has joined me now. It's so interesting, isn't it, Robert? Because I've also been highly critical of King Charles. And I think the jury is still out on the political stuff and, you know, the eco-extremists and the links to the World Economic Forum, but he did a great job these past 12 days, didn't he? It's hard to criticise.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting for a start. I mean, I was interested to hear you just report that he's going back to Scotland now.
Yes.
I think when we look at the whole question of the unity of the United Kingdom, it's interesting that the Queen died in Scotland and Charles didn't fly up to Scotland. He was in Scotland already. So it's a reminder to those of us on an historical cast that people talk about our royal family having German origins. It has Scottish origins before that. And I think it was very significant the way in which he went to Northern Ireland. And one actually got Sinn Féin and other anti-monarchists willing to meet him. I was talking to somebody who'd worked with the Queen, and I said, you know, we all know that the Queen had no power, but great influence. How did you see that in the Commonwealth? And he said, well, the thing was, you know, you come to a Commonwealth conference all ready to go into battle for your particular cause, and you could see the guy or the woman across the table you were going to have a battle with, and then you met the Queen, and somehow the atmosphere changed.
Yeah.
I'm an unashamed monarchist, and it seems to me that's a very fine example of the way in which a truly independent constitutional monarchy can help resolve disputes and bring us closer together, as we have been for the last 2 weeks. But of course, I detect in you a suspicion as to whether Charles really can maintain that independence.
Well, look, we know what he thinks about everything. We've already seen over the past 12 days that politicians are going to try and influence him. I mean, we literally heard the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davies say, oh, I want to talk to you about climate change. We saw the same thing from President Macron of France. Now it's going to be up to Charles to prove that he can actually say, no, that's no longer my role. But look, I want to talk about The Crown, because it's amazing how influential this TV series. You are the historian for the TV series.
John, let me just interrupt there. I'm just the historian.
Yes.
I am not the author. It's written by Peter Morgan.
No, you're not. Absolutely.
And some would say that's the worst role of all, to be the historian, because we don't stick to history all the time in terms of facts. But is that what you're going to ask me?
Well, that's what I was going to say, because obviously you have, and your work has helped craft the character of Charles that we see on screen. Now, I know for a fact, Robert, Charles and his team have been very disturbed by his portrayal in the earlier seasons because they think it's terrible PR for him amongst young people. Were you conscious of that? This is now our king. I mean, are you worried? Because presumably the new series has already been filmed. It's over the course of Diana's death, isn't it? So I presumably imagine it's not all going to be sweetness and light for Charles.
Well, I mean, we're recounting history, and it's no secret that season 5, which is coming up in November, will look at the 80s and 90s. Now, no matter how you look at the details of the 80s and 90s, the big theme of the 1980s and 90s was the breakdown of the fabled royal marriage, for whatever reason, the recriminations between both sides. We know for an absolute fact, because Prince Charles complained about it to a friend, that his mother refused to meet Camilla. The Queen refused to meet Camilla. According to Charles himself, speaking to his PR staff, the Queen had described her as a wicked woman. Now, those are facts, and nobody can deny them. Now, when people watch the series, they can say, well, Camilla and Diana didn't actually have lunch together in that restaurant, it was in this restaurant. And they can point out, for example, throughout many episodes of the series, there is the wonderful figure of Martin Charteris, who is the private secretary to the Queen. In fact, he was only private secretary for, 7, 8, 9 years. But the Crown goes over decades. We can't every episode bring in a new private secretary. So we have one private secretary to illustrate the very crucial role that the courtiers play in shaping the monarchy. Yes, it is going to be difficult because my big theory about monarchy is that the most successful royals are the humble ones who realise it's not all about me. And you can immediately think of one royal who does think it's all about him and has come to grief as a result. Prince Charles has had tendencies in that direction. I think the great secret of the Queen's success is that she wasn't born into the main line of succession. She was like a Princess Beatrice or Eugenie, destined for an obscure life, and it was destiny and the misbehaviour of adults who threw her into the main line. But right from the beginning, that little girl who was so close to her grandfather, George V, realised this is a team game. And even though she became captain of the team, she always remained a team player.
No, indeed. Look, I want to look ahead because, of course, you had your fascinating book out on the breakdown of the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry. The future relations between the new Prince and Princess of Wales and the Sussexes are going to be absolutely critical to the future of the monarchy, aren't they? What's your impression over what's happened these past 12 days? Because for me, with everything that I'm looking at and seeing and hearing, there hasn't been any genuine rapprochement.
I agree with you, Dan. Harry and William have been together on 3 significant occasions now since they had their big bust-up. For the death of Prince Philip, when they came together and walked across the courtyard, for the dedication of the statue to their mother, and then in recent days, honouring their grandmother. And I have to pay tribute to their professionalism. And when I say that they were acting, I don't mean to demean their behaviour at all. Both of them showed themselves willing to subordinate their personal disagreements to the bigger cause, their grandfather, their grandmother, and their mother. And they did it beautifully and properly. But there's a fundamental rift there, and I know you know quite a lot about it because you, as a reporter, were the first one to reveal this plan of Meghan and Harry to go off and be half royal and half non-royal, and the way in which the Queen said either you're in or you're out. And the fundamental distinction, without going into all sorts of unpleasant details, is that William felt that Harry, and Meghan in particular, with her love of publicity, were not accepting this idea that the royal family is a team, that they mistook celebrity for royalty. It particularly happened on a tour to Australia. And the way in which Meghan in particular, she came from Hollywood, this whole idea of you're either above the line as a star or you're below the line and you can be kicked around. William felt that this just was not right, that royal protocol, well, not royal protocol, royal principles were being infringed. So for him, as a future heir and king, this was an institutional question. For Harry, it's a matter of his wife being undervalued, in his opinion. So you've got a classic clash between duty and love. Both of those go very deep. And I think, the body language experts who chose to see little real sympathy, probably, between the two of them, probably got it right.
Yeah.
No, I think you're completely right. And of course, that is going to be a huge challenge for our new...
Well, it is, because Prince Charles said he wanted a slimmed-down monarchy. I don't think he imagined...
Not this slim.
Not as slim as that. And there's
extra small.
Exactly, exactly.
No, indeed. Robert Lacey, best-selling historian, of course, for the hit TV series The Crown. So great to have you, Robert Lacey. But coming up, is BBC lovey Graham Norton right that licence fee payers don't want to see right-wing guests on his chat show? Spiked Online's Tom Slater uncancelled on that soon. But first, as violence erupts between elements of Leicester's Hindu and Muslim communities, should we blame social media for this violence? Or, as some of my superstar panel suggest, has irresponsible and illegal immigration led us here? Plus, do you buy Holly Willoughby's and Philip Schofield's explanation for their lying in state scandal on This Morning? I'm going to show you what they had to say as the media buzz continues after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages in now. Let's go to the Eye first, actually, which leads on a, quote, mortgage rate shock as interest rates are expected to rise by 2 percentage points in the next 4 months. The Guardian reports that Liz Truss will urge world leaders at the UN General Assembly to join Britain by introducing far-reaching tax cuts. Truss will argue that prioritising economic growth is the best way to stop Russia from manipulating the global economy. However, US President Joe Biden reportedly unconvinced. The Independent also reports on Truss and Biden clashing over tax cuts for the rich ahead of a meeting at the UN summit. The US President slammed trickle-down economics, so Number 10 has denied that it was a jibe at the new PM. And anyway, he's a Democrat, so of course he's going to have a different view on tax policy. The Daily Mirror leads with a thoroughly modern monarchy as Charles promises a slimmed-down coronation amidst the cost of living crisis. Ceremony will reportedly be inclusive to reflect the makeup of the country and the Commonwealth. On tomorrow's Daily Star, the McCann's new blow as they lose their latest challenge in the European Court over a libel case. Their main story, though, which we'll be discussing in a second, Holly and Phil's queue-jumping debacle alongside the headline, Q do you think we are? Who Q do you think you are? And actually The Sun, leading on that too, claims that Holly Willoughby is battling for her this morning job after a queue-skipping scandal with Philip Schofield. A petition for her to go is gaining momentum despite the on-air apology today, and we're going to have more on that in a moment. The Sun revealing there too the coronation of King Charles III expected to take place next spring, with aides looking at dates in May or June at Westminster Abbey. More on the Media Buzz now, though, with tonight's superstar panel, Star Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robertson, and the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. And breaking tonight, more than 200 Muslim men have been locked in a tense standoff with police as they reportedly protested a Hindu temple near Birmingham. Fears are growing that sectarian violence seen in Leicester over recent weeks is now threatening to spread across the West Midlands. It comes as the disorder that has plagued Leicester since late August has now been linked to Muslim and Hindu groups using social media to taunt each other. Riot police have been called to protect the normally peaceful Midlands city as cops struggle to contain large gangs of men brawling in the streets with weapons. Videos shared on TikTok, Twitter and Instagram show violent mobs targeting rival religious sites and even burning flags. Look.
The Hindu, isn't it?
Is it? Number 8, Cottage Road. Cottage Road, Leicester. Yeah, urgent. Come on, account, brother, come on, account. Yo! All of them masked. All of them are masked. You hear? Yeah, go on. Standing here. Come on, look, you got a weapon in his hand and you're allowing it. Man's got.
Rumours of false attacks shared online have also riled Muslims and Hindus, with Leicestershire cops forced to publicly deny fast-spreading claims that mosques and temples had been vandalised. The disorder has got so bad that the Indian High Commission sensationally stepped in with a strongly worded statement today. It read, "We strongly condemn the violence perpetrated against the Indian community in Leicester and vandalisation of premises and symbols of Hindu religion. We have strongly taken up this matter with UK authorities and have sought immediate action against those involved in the attacks." Leicester's Mayor, Sir Peter Soulsby, claims the violence has been fuelled by, quote, very distorted social media stuff, in addition to people coming from outside of the city looking for trouble. But Calvin Robertson, is he really right to blame this on social media?
No, not at all. I think this is the problem of importing foreign dramas. We've seen a lot of the culture wars comes from America, and this is clearly an issue with Muslim values being incompatible with British values. You know, the idea that Sharia law somehow trumps UK law. Religious tolerance is a key British value. There are many people that wouldn't like to see mosques cropping up in their area, but they do not protest them, they do not fight people for building them, and they do not do what we're seeing here with the Hindu temples being perpetrated by the Muslims. This is down to insufficient integration and too much mass immigration.
Amanda Platel, is social media to blame, or is it immigration, as Calvin Robertson and earlier Nigel Farage very strongly said?
No, I take on board all that Calvin said. For me, Leicester East, which is where all these things are happening, you know, got this debate that it's about extreme Hindus, it's about extreme Muslims. But in fact, when you look at that this particular area is in the bottom 20 or the top 20 of most deprived areas in the country. They've got 42% child poverty, they've got 40% family poverty, and this has been going on for a long time. And I'm afraid what I really fear is that this has just been used as a kind of it's a tinderbox. You've got young guys who've grown up from Muslim families, from Hindu families, from black families. 60% of the population in this particular area are from those constituents. Those from and it's a tinderbox. And now we've got a cost of living crisis. And you know, I know this may make me sound like a bleeding heart, and I'm sorry, Rebecca, that's your role.
I was just thinking, like, what a sensible thing to have said.
You know, this has just been waiting to happen. Young guys, and they're all men, and they're frustrated, they've got no jobs, they've got no education, they've got no future, and this is what we're going to see.
Rebecca Reid?
I think it's a crisis of masculinity, and I think these things are going to happen.
Is that prompted by social media in any way?
No, I think it's so lazy to blame social media. It's what they used to blame eating disorders on women's magazines, and then before that they used to blame sexism on lads' magazines. It's never the social media company, it's never the magazine. You can't make a happy, well-adjusted person behave like that because they saw something on TikTok.
I agree.
This is a massive, long-term, endemic problem, absolutely. Tied up with poverty, tied up with lack of positive male role models, lack of aspiration, lack of feeling like you belong, lack of so many things. But it takes a lot to get somebody to behave like that. It really does.
OK. Well, we're going to keep on this story, of course. Now, privileged ITV presenters Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield have hit back at claims they skipped the queue to see the Queen line in state after a fierce and completely understandable public backlash. Today, This Morning ran a video with a breathlessly remorseful Holly doing her very best to explain what happened in the viral clip from Friday, claiming they were given permission along with, quote, hundreds of accredited broadcasters and journalists.
It was strictly for the purpose of reporting on the event for millions of people in the UK who haven't been able to visit Westminster in person. The rules were that we would be quickly escorted around the edges to a platform at the back. In contrast, those paying respects walked along a carpeted area beside the coffin and were given time to pause.
OK, right. So, Holly, the Queen's coffin was only visible if you were walking on a carpet, and you did it all for the millions who couldn't visit Westminster in person. OK, got it. I mean, if only there was a live stream running 24/7. Anyway, go on.
None of the broadcasters and journalists there took anyone's place in the queue, and no one filed past the Queen. We, of course, respected those rules. However, we realised that it may have looked like something else, and therefore totally understand the reaction. Please know that we would never jump a queue.
That's probably got to be one of the, if not the most profound moments of my life, I think.
I couldn't agree more.
Look, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this wasn't a piece of journalism. I haven't seen a sign of any crew, and that shaky camera at the end looks as though it was some sort of afterthought filmed on an iPhone. Susanna Reid on this morning's sister show Good Morning Britain, an esteemed journalist who was able to queue up for hours. Plus, tonight, this is very telling, new footage has emerged showing Holly and Phil being escorted into Westminster Hall. What's that in the background? It appears to be people queuing. Literal queue jumping. Now, look, these two, they always want to blame someone else. Look at their response to their energy bills competition controversy, where they sniped at internet trolls and then doubled down. And Amanda Patel, I actually think what they should have done is held their hands up and said, we skipped the queue, it was a mistake.
Yes, they should, and they didn't. And they're banged to rights. And there's no way they can wriggle out of it. I mean, that scene, we were talking about this earlier, Rebecca, about that there's an old guy with, like, a cane walking along really slowly, and they bounce up. And Holly, of course, had her mask on, so no one would recognise her.
That worked. That worked.
Oh, look, they're banged to rights.
Rebecca, are you angry about this one?
No, I don't think... Almost nobody is angry. We're just
I'm angry.
People are just
I'm
laughing.
really angry.
Oh, Rebecca, no.
People are laughing at them.
People are furious about this.
My favourite thing is there's a nice shot of my uncle in that clip.
Is there?
Yeah, he looks very smart in his brown coat.
And he had lined up?
And he had queued up. Indeed, he had not Holly.
Is he angry that Holly and Phil just managed to get straight in?
If you're watching Uncle Francis, call me, let me know if you're angry. I think most people think it's a ridiculous thing. And honestly, if they had just gone on this morning and done a roundup of the funniest memes from Twitter, laughing at them for their behaviour, people would have thought, OK, at least they're being self...
I don't agree with that, Rebecca.
No.
I think that
people are furious.
They're banged to rights, that lots of people thought, do I have the time? Do I have 12? Do I have 20 hours to queue up? And lots of people did, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And you look at David Beckham,
they must be
did queue up.
If you look at how everybody was like, David Beckham, God, David Beckham, Prince David Beckham.
But it was great he did queue.
It is great that he queued, but it was the best free publicity. Qatar won.
It was
the most sensible thing he could have done.
Come on.
And Phil and Holly are probably kicking themselves they didn't get all that admiration.
Calvin, I think the problem is we're a little bit sick of the way that Philip and Holly always blame everyone else. We're a little bit sick of the way that Philip, for example, used our great colleague here, Eamon Holmes, for his coming out announcement and then threw him under the bus. I think we're just a bit fed up. These two.
I mean, for me, I could not get incensed about the queue jumping, but I really don't like the lying. And this thing that, oh, everyone else was on the carpeted area. No, the carpet was where the coffin was. Everyone was walking down the Great Hall, as you did, and you stopped and bowed. You didn't go straight to the media platform. Don't lie about it. But like you said, put your hands up, apologise, and move on.
And lots of great journalists have done that.
I'm a bit frustrated that it does seem to be Holly who's getting the bulk of this. Phil seems to be very...
Oh, no, it's both.
Honestly, people are weird with him. People let him get away with all sorts. It's very odd.
It's both.
Look, he had to fit in his visit there between his ads for gambling things and, buying cars and stuff like that. He's a busy guy.
Does he do gambling adverts?
What?
I didn't know that.
He's all over the media
we don't watch
doing
TV.
his wretched ads.
That's naughty.
Hey,
I don't know if it's gambling, though, isn't it? Something about cars or
something?
Yeah, get your best price in your car.
Unclear whether it's gambling or not.
What do you call that?
Amanda Littell, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reed, thank you so much. Now, coming up, you've been clamouring for it. It's back. Who will be named tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass? But first, is BBC lovey Graham Norton right that licence fee payers never want to see right-wing guests? Tom Slater, uncouncilled and mayor seconds. First, though, a look at tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Liz Truss gets her premiership underway, could she be the leader to finally level up Britain? Well, former Education Secretary Justine Greening, who served in the cabinet with our new PM, says no one is more committed to ensuring every Brit gets a fair crack. She joins me live. Plus, former MEP and Spectator columnist Patrick O'Flynn breaks down the sorry state of republicanism as we enter a new royal era. And there's opinion galore from columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle, man of the people Charlie Lawson, and my superstar panel, ex-Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But I'm delighted to say it's time now for Uncancelled. First time in a while, but you know the drill. It's where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, he may be a lefty-lovey, but Graham Norton stunned his Virgin Radio listeners when he interviewed J.K. Rowling on his show last month. Now, Rowling discussed a wide range of topics from her latest book to how she copes with online abuse, but Norton failed to directly address the Harry Potter author's demonisation for believing in basic biology. Listen.
How do we get back to how can we de-escalate all of the things that are going on?
I think on one level, I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure any individual can. I mean, I try and behave online as I would like others to behave. I wouldn't, ever want to... I've never threatened anyone, obviously, and I certainly wouldn't want anyone to go to their houses or anything like that.
Yeah.
Social media is definitely... It's simultaneous. It can be a lot of fun. And I do like the sort of pub argument aspect of it. That can be a fun thing to do.
And Norton's decision not to discuss Rowling's gender-critical beliefs in her fight for women's rights wasn't an accident, though. No, it was because he sees them as problematic opinions and chose to censor them. When the BBC talk show star was asked why he doesn't have right-wing voices on his hit show on the BBC, he said, it's very hard to find a right-wing guest. And if you do, the audience probably don't want to see them. So Norton's liberal agenda, crystal clear then. But is he right that licence fee payers don't actually want to hear from any right-wing voices on his and other BBC shows? If that's the case, then surely it's time we just defunded the BBC. Joining me now, Spiked Online editor Tom Slater. I mean, look, Tom, do you know what? I really have to hold my hands up and say I admire Graham Norton's honesty here, because what he's just done is reveal the thinking of the liberal elite who run the BBC. They simply do not believe that audiences want to hear from anyone right-wing, because that is the Britain that they live in.
No, certainly, the mask slips. I've got to say, I do find this idea that it's impossible to find a right-of-centre guest, and that even if you could find one of these mythical creatures, that no one watching Graham Norton's show would want to actually see it. Either Graham's very out of touch with his audience, or no one right of centre watches the BBC anymore. Depressingly, both of those explanations could be plausible in their own right these days. What I find interesting about these comments is, the thing about kind of the BBC or the entertainment industry more broadly is that a lot of this kind of bias, a lot of this tendency to, if you are to talk about politics or you talk a certain type of politics, to kind of just mock and lambast one side and not the other, is that it is kind of unthinking. At this point, it's just the water they swim in, and I think that's why they keep putting their foot in it like this, because they almost don't see how kind of baked in all of these kind of biases and prejudices are at this point.
No, indeed. And that was also fascinating why he decided not to ask J.K. Rowling about her problematic views. I mean, Tom Slater, these problematic views are shared by the vast, vast majority of the country. They're not problematic at all, and it just shows, again, how out of touch someone like Norton is.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the way in which he was talking about that interview with J.K. Rowling, in which her views had to kind of just be bracketed and not discussed, considering the fact that, as you say, her great moral crime, her great unspeakable heresy is that she believes, as most people do, in the reality of biological sex, thinks certain rights should flow from that. I think shows you about what a difficult position that we're in, is that the Overton window is just so narrow in certainly these venues that it is even someone like J.K. Rowling, who on basically 99.9% of all the other issues we might talk about will probably be very aligned with someone like Graham Norton, is a heretic who has to be, if she is interviewed at all, has to kind of keep stum. But that is the world that we're living in, unfortunately.
It is. Well, Tom Slater, always great to speak to you. Your website is one of the few places where you can get some sanity in the online media these days. Spiked Online editor Tom Slater, thank you so much. But it's back. Oh, no, sorry, before we go there, we did approach the BBC regarding Norton's comments on their policy on booking guests. They didn't respond. But anyway, now it's time for Greatest Britain Union Jackass. I'm so excited it's back. Amanda Patel, who's your nominee for today's Greatest Britain?
Dan, I have to start with an apology to Kate Middleton, who, among lots of other people, who said that she would be a complete disaster, was a social climber, and tried to ensnare the prince.
You got that wrong.
Excuse me, I'm not alone here, OK?
I never said that, Amanda Patel. I've always supported Kate.
She's been absolutely magnificent in the last week, and, you know, if I feel secure in the monarchy being in anyone's hands, it's hers. She's just been brilliant.
Yeah, no,
Sorry, Kate.
No.
It wasn't me. It was Carol Malone.
It's always Carol Malone. Calvin Robertson, your Greatest Britain nominee.
The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby.
Oh,
Really?
I thought you didn't like this guy, Calvin.
Despite our personal differences, he honoured Her late Majesty at her funeral. He put aside his fluffy politics. He preached some good old-fashioned religion. He spoke the good news, and that is his job. So more of that, please.
OK, very magnanimous of you. Well done. And Rebecca Reid, your Greatest Britain nominee.
Mine is Princess Charlotte, who was the most beautifully behaved child. I don't know if anybody's met any 7-year-olds, but they generally don't behave like that. She looked so smart. She told her brother not to forget to bow to the coffin as it came past. And I think she's an absolute gem of a child and a credit to her parents.
Oh, do you know what? I've got to go with Princess Charlotte. Quite weird. She's 7 years old, probably our youngest ever Greatest Britain. But no, she did her mum and dad proud at that funeral yesterday. Absolutely. Union Jackass time now. Amanda Patel, your nominee, please.
A job lot here, Dan. It's the entire Yorks, OK? Andrew, Fergie, those hapless princesses, hanger-on princesses. It was outrageous to see Fergie at the funeral. I mean, and just think, this. I'm not saying this out of any kind of malice. We did not see Princess Anne's first husband, he was the father of her 2 children, at the funeral as some Klingon at the back of the procession. Get rid of them all. We never want to see any of the Yorks ever again.
Amanda Patel, you've left me speechless twice tonight. Look, all I'm going to say is the Queen did like Fergie, Amanda.
Yeah, she
the Queen
says
wanted
that.
her there.
And the Queen can't say anything now, can she?
No, that is
the Queen
true.
loved me.
That is true. That is true. Calvin Robertson, your Union Jackass nominee.
Pay Burley, because she gives journalism a bad name with this gotcha nonsense. It's got to stop.
Oh, yeah, let's look.
£17,000 is what you got, apparently, as a payoff.
As you know the answer to that one as well, Kay. I didn't take that.
OK, so you said that you were going to give it to a charity.
No, I didn't. I said that if I wasn't able to reject the money, I would give it to a charity, but I rejected it.
Oh, OK,
as you already know.
OK, I didn't know that. That's right.
You know, I think you're completely right, Calvin. It has to stop, that sort of journalism. Rebecca Reid, your Union Jackass nominee.
I'd just like to say that I love Beatrice and Eugenie, and I'm so sorry for the pasting they just got.
No, good. They're grieving. We need some balance on that. Thank you.
Mine is Liz Truss, because I don't think that removing caps for banker bonuses should be like anywhere near the top of the list of things to get sorted.
As long as it's not for her clothing. Amanda Patel.
I looked at her dress and it was fine.
It was not fine. You're clearly not a churchgoer.
I'm with Rebecca on this one. I'm with Rebecca on this one. But Union Jackass winner is absolutely Kay Burley. Calvin is completely right. That sort of gotcha journalism is just rubbish. We've moved on from it. Move on, Kay. Thank you so much to my fabulous Tuesday night superstar, Amanda Patel, Calvin Robertson, Rebecca Reid. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Headliners is next, though. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
Hello, a fairly quiet spell of weather over the next couple of days for most of us. Quite a lot of cloud around.
but it will be dry for most through the rest of this evening and overnight, although with one exception, which is the far northwest of Scotland. That's because we have this weather front close by. Otherwise, though, high pressure in charge of our weather, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the next few days. So through this evening and overnight, quite a lot of cloud around, but there certainly will be some breaks in that cloud. That, though, will allow a little bit of mist and fog to develop in places by the end of the night. And still in the far northwest of Scotland, we have this weather front bringing thicker cloud with outbreaks of rain and also some quite brisk winds. So we start Wednesday on a reasonably mild note in the towns and cities, but it will be a little bit chilly in the countryside. Some brightness around first thing, especially once any mist and fog patches melt away. But there will be variable amounts of cloud around through the course of Wednesday. A little bit of brightness here and there, but also the chance that the cloud could just about be thick enough to produce the odd drizzly shower. And still we have this thicker cloud in the northwest, and that will gradually start to move its way southeastwards later on Wednesday, but more especially through Thursday and Friday. So overnight Wednesday, we can see that weather front continuing to make very slow progress south and eastwards. Otherwise, it's more of the same. Quite a lot of cloud around, a few breaks in that cloud, a little bit of mist and fog developing, and again, not particularly cold underneath that cloud. So for Thursday, we do start to see this weather front making slightly more progress southeastward. So for Thursday, it's mainly still the north and west of the UK that bears the brunt of the thicker cloud with outbreaks of rain, and that makes its way southeastwards on Friday, gradually clearing during the weekend. Bye for now.